My name is Tom Robinson. If you're new to the Wildfire Data Working Group, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm a Director of Conservation Strategy with Together Bay Area, joined today by my friend and colleague, Michaela Nee, who helps coordinate these working group meetings. I see our Executive Director, Annie Burke, is on the call as well. Thanks for being here, Annie. We've got some previous presenters on the call. Nadia, thanks for being here. Great. It's wonderful to have you all here. I'd say we've got quorum. Let's go ahead and get started. No Brown Act here. We don't have to worry about that. Great, folks. Thanks so much for being here. Again, I'm Tom Robinson. We're diving into a theme today that's really central to kind of the spirit of this working group. It's central to the idea of data-informed land stewardship. It's managing data workflows from pre-treatment surveys all the way through to planning, implementation, and retreatment. It's a big, big topic. We just have a 1 hour meeting today, so it's a lot to wrap our arms around. But we've got some fantastic speakers today that are going to help kind of paint the picture for us. But before we get to the main topic, I just have a few announcements I want to make, and also just create some space for any of you to add some announcements, anything that the rest of the group should know about. The first is actually just a quick, a little bit more about this group. If you're new to the Regional Wildfire Data Working Group, we started in the wake of the 2020 fires that really sort of affected almost all the counties in the Bay Area. We realized that there was sort of a sector of the land management kind of field out there that would be benefited by getting together on occasion or periodically to make sure that we're synced up. And that kind of sliver or slice of the pie was really the data managers out there. In the wake of a fire, often happens is, executive level folks will pivot to the data folks and go, what just happened? What intel do we have? And how do we use the data that I'm hearing is coming from the feds or the state or other local organizations and agencies? And that was really the spirit. That was what started it all, was just making sure that everybody in the Bay Area, in the 10 county Bay Area, had a forum. The data managers had a forum to come together and share information. So folks who had experienced a wildfire before can share with folks who hadn't. And it's just evolved since then. We're in our fourth, fifth year, and it's just been a really wonderful place to come and learn. Every December, we get together as a working group and decide what we want to talk about in the next year. And one of the top things that came up last December was, hey, let's ask some folks who are really in the know to paint that picture of data workflows, like as I said, sort of pre-treatment through implementation, through planning, implementation, and retreatment. So we have three speakers. They've all agreed to be rather short with their presentations. Each person could probably fill the entire hour, of course, with the amount of knowledge and expertise they have. But we want to hear from you all as well. So this is very participatory. I see a lot of video cameras turned off. That's A-okay right now, but we will have some room for discussion later in the hour, and we would love to see you. So one quick announcement. I have to admit that I was not able to attend the webinar last Friday on the governor's proclamation related to fast-tracking wildfire safety projects and expanding beneficial fire. And I have a link here to the video for that. But I'm curious if anyone, there's the link. I'm curious if anybody attended that webinar, if you have any high-level points you want to share with the group. And while I'm waiting for folks to chime in, I just mentioned that this is a proclamation by the governor in the wake of the LA fires, that's really meant to sort of streamline treatment, wildfire risk reduction treatments. And so, yeah, if you haven't, just curious if anybody attended that's on the call.
I
Great.
attended one.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
definitely there. It was
Yeah,
a lot
please.
of good information.
Mm-hmm. Any high level points that you'd want to share that were just sort of ahas for you? Peter, I saw you raise your hand. Deb, yeah.
There's still a lot of details that weren't shared in the webinar, specifically the environmental protection plan that you still
Mm-hmm.
have to comply by. So I think a lot of people are going to be waiting to get more information about that. That's basically, you know, the streamlined version of what you would normally have to do for Sequoia and other permitting processes to, you know, reduce impact on sensitive resources.
I think the big takeaway for me was, and it was really reassuring to know that while CEQA has been waived for this work, that it's still the state's perspective that, or intention to still protect natural resources, and there are best management practices or BMPs that need to be followed during the work. And so it's really important that everyone's going to be super eager to get all this really important work done, but there is still going to be a process to make sure that sensitive resources are protected, waterways, species, and their habitats. So I think that's really important. And that's the great thing about wildfire work, is you can get a lot of really great work done and still protect natural resources.
Yeah, great.
I reviewed the EPP that they put out, at least on that talk, and it seems very analogous to CalVTP MMRPs and protection measures, with a few other little details and some exempt material as well. But yeah, really, really analogous. And that's a robust program that a lot of different regulators agree on already. So that makes a lot of sense that they're just expanding that out to get more work done, outside the CalVTP identified treatment areas and outside the SRA, and just expediting a lot more.
I think another important takeaway for anyone who wants to take advantage of it is it's for 2025 only at this point. So if you want to get your work approved through this new system, it's for work in 2025 only.
Well, they said it had to be submitted by October 2025, and then
right. But it'll cover 2 years.
Or wait, no, submitted this calendar year, but initiated by October 2026, and then completed within 2 years of its initiation. So
okay, good to know.
To keep in mind on that on the EEP, as well as that there's a still tribal consultation, which will add more time to the approval process to get the thing shovel ready.
And Coastal Commission as well, correct?
Coastal Act is also waived as part of the
okay,
as part of the proclamation. And then another thing that I found really interesting, well, I guess the EPP is really similar to if anybody was involved in the 2019 governor's projects, or like 35 expedited projects, it's a really similar EPP to the EPP that was released then for those projects. And also the proclamation waives competitive procurement requirements, which I found to be really interesting as someone who often releases RFPs. So,
well, hey, thank you everybody for all that, Timothy. That's fantastic. Sounds like there's still there was some clarity provided, but then there's still some questions. Peter, to your point about consultations and which like which BMPs maybe. So we'll keep our ear to the ground on that and send out. But the Regional Wildfire Data Working Group Google group is accessible to everybody. So just an invitation. If you hear new information coming to light, please post that to the Google group, and we'll commit to doing the same. So thanks everybody for that. The second thing I want to just mention is there's a 1 hour discussion coming up called Living Sustainably with Wildfire, Science for Solutions. And I posted this to the working group website, but this is coming up on April 24th from 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific. And it's a panel on how changing wildfire activity is affecting ecosystems, water resources, communities, and the importance of science solutions. And one of the panel members is Winslow Hansen, who's the director of the Western Fire and Forest Resilience Collaborative, who spoke last year to this group on some really fascinating science that they're pushing forward. So just a note for that. And a big plug for a meeting coming up on Friday with the Flame, our sister group Flame. Tatiana Manzanillo is on the call today. Tatiana, can I tap you, or Zoe also? I believe I saw Zoe Fung. Yeah, Tatiana, do you mind mentioning the Flame meeting coming up on Friday?
Yeah, thanks for the plug, Tom. So Zoe and I co-lead this group called Flame, which stands for the Fire Resilient Lands Alliance for the Management of Everything. And it's a San Francisco Bay plus Santa Cruz County area that focuses on gathering folks who do fuels management, natural resource work. They work in fire departments, what have you, to come together and learn about projects going on, collaborate on ideas, and share out.
Wonderful, Tatiana. Thank you so much. Yeah, fantastic meetings. Can't wait. I know I'm coming and can't wait. So thank you for that. Folks, in the interest of time, let's get cracking. As I mentioned, today we're diving into a topic that's central to the spirit of this working group, managing data workflows from pre-treatment surveys all the way through planning, implementation, and retreatment. And I mentioned this topic rose up during our course plotting meeting last December. Folks really highlighted the need to for better understanding about when it comes to handling data across the full life cycle of fuels reduction work. As more agencies and organizations scale up their fuels reduction work, we're all facing the challenge of managing complex evolving data sets that need to serve multiple purposes, all while staying grounded in ecological and community goals. So we're really excited to invite three folks today to share how they're navigating that challenge in their work. And we're looking forward to an open conversation about what's working, what's hard, and as ever, ask where we can align to make things easier across the region. So our speakers today are Debie Montana and Alex Hirth from Sequoia Ecological Consulting, Esther Mandeno from Digital Mapping Solutions, Givonne Law from the East Bay Regional Parks District Fire Department. Deb and Alex are going to provide kind of an overview of Sequoia's workflows and some of the tech they use. And Deb and Alex volunteered to paint the broad data landscape picture. It's not an easy task in 7 minutes that we've given them. So Deb and Alex, just thank you for taking on that challenge. Esther is going to share what she's learned over the years working with land trusts and kind of other similar kind of nonprofit or smaller land managing organizations. Esther, thank you for joining us. And Givonne is going to use one of her projects at the East Bay Regional Park District as a data workflow case study. So thank you all and your organizations for sharing your knowledge with us today. And Deb and Alex, I invite you to take the stage.
All righty. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having us here today. I think Alex is going to initiate our slideshow. It is going to seem like we are talking very fast. We are talking very fast because we did this slideshow in 20 minutes earlier, and now we're doing it in 7. So bear with us. There will be time for questions and answers afterwards. Let's see. Go ahead to the next slide, Alex. Some pretty pictures. So Sequoia supports wildfire projects throughout the greater Bay Area in Northern California. We have planners, biologists, arborists, foresters, mapping professionals, et cetera, on the team to support this work. Next slide. And then this is just a list of some of our clients. It's a sampling that we've provided service to and provided these data management tools and techniques over the last decade. Next slide. So we're going to start with project planning and how important mapping is in the planning phase of a project, and capturing that data and creating the maps is just imperative to project success. And this is a map of Moraga-Arunda Fire District. We're going to be using a lot of real life project examples. So in the beginning, we like to map the project limits. This is especially useful in the grant proposal portion, but also when we're really fine tuning and designing the project, we need to not only map the limits, but also the associated buffers so that we are conducting our surveys with the appropriate buffer of the project area, as well as the access routes. And then we also capture what type of treatment method and activity will be taking place throughout the project. So we often divide a project into smaller portions based on what treatment method we're using, whether it's mastication, prescribed burn, manual vegetation removal, or grazing. And Alex, did you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, so this is often a very collaborative process. We'll have teaming members or subcontractors that have expertise with designing treatments, and usually we're working, of course, directly with our clients as well. And we found that this is true kind of throughout our process, but especially at this initial phase, being flexible with technology and the data that you're working with is important. Everyone has different backgrounds and is used to different technologies, so we do everything from live GIS screen shares where we're drawing or buffering things in real time and looking at, where backyards meet wild open space, to getting submitted KMZs and integrating those in, coming from Google Earth into existing mapping, and kind of everything in between.
And also I'll add that this portion of the work is actually really important to differentiate. Oftentimes we work on projects that have different funding mechanisms. And so while one portion of the project is under a notice of exemption, it's getting funding from a different source. You can't then use or treat that area with the crews that are supposed to be working under a different grant and a different funding mechanism. So oftentimes this mapping is also supporting our clients and making sure that they're following the grant guidelines as well.
Yeah, so fine segmentation of the areas helps for tracking that and work progress once you get into implementation.
Great.
Very briefly, going to talk about the Esri ecosystem. As we said, we try to navigate whatever technologies everyone's working with, but we lean into and mostly rely on the Esri ecosystem. I'm sure many people are familiar with it as, the most common commercial GIS software. But high level overview, Esri's ArcGIS Online as WebGIS provides a really robust platform to work off of and can be used with or without ArcGIS Pro or other desktop GIS software, through the suite of apps that you see there in the box. Those are the primary ones that we rely on, and this graphic shows a very brief overview of how you would potentially prepare data in desktop GIS and then push that data or publish it up to the cloud. And from there, the maps that you move into the cloud can be used directly in the browser in a variety of formats, including instant apps and dashboards, which are really great for providing summaries of data to clients or to the public when that's required. And then a variety of mobile apps such as Survey 123 and Field Maps, which we rely on for data collection and for Survey 123 custom form creation that can still be integrated back into mapping. So that's a high-level overview of what we do, and a lot of the subsequent slides are going to be discussing which pieces of the platform we use where and how they're integrated.
So before the project is implemented, we conduct reconnaissance surveys where we identify sensitive resources that need to be avoided during implementation. That can include waterways, riparian corridors, suitable habitat for sensitive species, sensitive plant communities, as well as cultural resources.
And once we've had those treatment areas established, we build a database in desktop GIS, push all of that up to WebGIS. And this is just an example screenshot of a web map with some representative empty features that have been filled during reconnaissance surveys, collecting data such as those aquatic resources, potentially some scrub polygons, and you can see a lot of those environmental observations are wood rat middens, which are very common in the East Bay, of course.
And then we also conduct specialized and focused surveys, so protocol botanical surveys 3 to 4 times a year during the blooming seasons, focused special status species surveys, spotted owl, what else do we do? Dusky-footed wood rat, etc. And then the cultural resources, they also have pedestrian surveys that take place, and they delineate areas that should be avoided during implementation.
So most of that data collection happens in the Field Maps app using those web maps, and then that data is maintained back to desktop GIS to create static maps like you see a clip of here for reporting purposes.
And then we get to implementation. And after we've collected all this data, that data is now available to the crews in real time on their cell phones. So they can see, next slide, when they get to a sensitive area, they can actually see the associated avoidance buffer on their phones and go, oh, wait, here's where I am in relation to that sensitive buffer. No work's going to occur in this area. And that really helps cut down the amount of biological monitoring that's needed. The crews are fully educated. There are no excuses. They know exactly where the buffers are and where they can and can't work. Alex?
Yeah, and our updates happen in real time, and we can tailor something like one of these instant apps that might be used by a crew or the client on a device to be pretty much the same, but adjust information as needed, especially when you run into things like cultural resources or protected plants that need to be necessarily location obscured. That's very easy to have all of that update in real time once the initial setup is done.
And then we also conduct pre and post treatment surveys. So the pre-treatment survey, project areas and buffers for the sensitive species, those are delineated. We go back out after the work's been done, and we're looking at differences in native plant cover, overall cover. We're looking for occasions of, or our ability to avoid habitat type conversion, which is a very important aspect under the CalVTP. So we're also looking at, there's an image there on that cell phone where we've mapped scrub habitat, and we've worked very closely with the crew to identify what type of work should occur there, how it should occur, and how much scrub they're allowed to take to avoid habitat type conversion or converting that scrub to, say, grassland. So this pre and post data is imperative to project success, and it also is great to show in the closeout report how well we've complied with the VTP, AMMs, and SPRs.
Yeah, and in these cases, in addition to leveraging some of those mapping applications, we're also leveraging Survey 123 to collect photos for photo points, more text information, and potentially run calculations and other reports.
And one thing that came up, especially on from Moraga-Orinda Fire Department and then also Contra Costa County Fire Department, is they created, I think Alex said, over 500 burn piles for Con Fire. So because they weren't going to be able to come back to those right away, they needed us to GPS those locations so that months later or even a year later, they can go back when the weather was suitable to conduct the burn. And so our biologist went out there and GPSed all the locations for the fire district.
Yeah, we set this mapping interface up, and actually the fire district was able to do a lot of this themselves. And one thing that I'd really like to highlight here is that in this case, Contra Costa Fire took advantage of free ArcGIS online accounts through the National Interagency Fire Center, which is a great resource for fire-related agencies and groups that may not have ArcGIS or ArcGIS online capabilities and may not need or have the funding to pay for it. They do offer free accounts.
Go ahead, Alex. You can take it.
This is just a good example of why maintaining good databases and data sources are important. Sticking with CalVTP here, there's quarterly reporting required, and so maintaining data integrity in all of your locations, including when things are exported to Excel, like you see on the small clip at the bottom, is very important for calculating those acreages each quarter and providing the proper information to CAL FIRE when you're working under a CAL FIRE grant.
And we already talked about habitat type conversion, so we can just move ahead.
The highlight here would just be that looking at before and after photos as part of pre and post treatment. This is a great example of that. That of course the photos are also part of the data, and maintaining the integrity of that piece of your data is important. And then
I think we got these from La Honda, right? So
correct.
Timothy Federal is appreciating the shout out to the awesome work.
They look familiar. Yeah.
That was a great project. Closeout report. So yeah, this is a requirement of the Cal VTP. We have to do a closeout report. We just finished, I think, our third or fourth one. And going back to that data that we've collected throughout the course of the project is so helpful. And it's also really great to inform the project proponent on where they want to focus their maintenance work. Where did they start on the project? Sometimes they don't, it's not a linear, you know, they don't go from point A to point B. They go point A to point AA to CC to, I mean, they just jump all around. And so knowing where they started, how they treated that area, and when it needs to go back, when they need to go back to conduct maintenance is really important. And this closeout report captures all the data, and it shows CAL FIRE that we complied with the Cal VTP, how many acres we treated, how we treated it. It's very thorough, but that it wouldn't be possible to complete this report without the appropriate use of the data collection technology. And this is all Alex.
Sort of tangential to all of that, Cal VTP wise, we created a land cover lookup tool for Maraga-Rinda Fire District that uses what was the preliminary enhanced life form mapping from Tuckman Geospatial for Contra Costa County. I know the fine scale is coming out soon, and basically attached that to all the parcels so that folks within Maraga-Rinda Fire District's jurisdiction can look up their address and see which of those habitat types are found on their property. And then we developed a booklet that provides best practices for environmental protection during fuel reduction activities to help guide their work without requiring permits and making sure that they're avoiding any impacts to potential sensitive species and resources. So that's something that's available publicly, both the booklet and the map, and is another use of same technologies. It's relying on ArcGIS Online and Instant Apps and all that stuff that we've discussed.
And you can peruse that on Maraga-Rinda's website as well.
Indeed.
How did we do? Was it 20 minutes?
It was what it was. It was awesome. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks,
what a phenomenal picture you just painted. It was a proper lecture, and I think anybody who's watching this later, everybody on the call just got a really great primer on how to do it, on one way of really what appears a very successful way to do it. Q&A from the group. Questions? Well, not hearing any, then please post. Oh, Andrea.
Yeah, let me find the right spot on the bar with all the buttons. Yeah, I was wondering if there are treatment targets that are met and how that's monitored as well. So if it's like, you know, reduce ground cover by 30% or woody species cover by X, if there's anything like that involved as well in your tracking.
That is definitely something we can capture. For the most part, our projects have really been about acres treated. They have to, per the grant guidelines, they have to treat a certain number of acres to meet the grant requirements. But that is certainly data that we could collect while we were out there. You know, we have botanists, arborists, ecologists that are qualified to do that. And it would be easy to capture a polygon or do, you know, cover estimates, et cetera, to capture any data we needed to. I'm not sure, I don't know if we've had to do specific data collection like that on any projects to date. But it's certain, I mean, because we're usually working under grant guidelines, but it's certainly something we can do.
At La Honda, we did kind of the opposite, where we had to retain 30% of scrub in scrub treatment areas. So we mapped, like, you know, retainment, is that a word? Polygons. Or I say we mapped, I didn't do anything, but Sequoia mapped them so that our crews could work around them.
Right. Good point.
Great. In the interest of time, I'm gonna have to ask any other questions to be handled at the end, because I want to make some space for our two other presenters. Let's hear Esther Mandeno. I'd love to welcome you to the stage, and let's hear about your lessons learned.
Sure, hopefully I'll be a little bit quicker. Deb and Alex did a great job with the full picture, and I rarely get to deal with the full picture. I'm always coming, or a lot of the clients come to me afterwards to clean up the data or help them afterwards. And so I think I'm going to share my screen real quick, just so you have something to look at other than me. All right, and so, oh, just gotta move this. Okay, so just real quick, 5 things that while you're putting together your program, things that you might want to think about when you're developing your debate, when you're trying to get a system as great as what Sequoia has going. How do I make it go forward? So just like Deb and Alex talked about, before you do anything, just take a moment and think of the entire life cycle, and going through the process, or maybe not going. You may not be able to go through the entire process, but just think about what the final data products that you're going to be either presenting to your funders or to your constituents or whomever, or your land managers. You just think that through just very early on in the process before you go out and start just collecting stuff willy-nilly. I know sometimes we don't have time for that, but if you can, that it makes a huge difference. And also, just like Deb mentioned about the funders and what the reporting requirements are, everyone is different. Some people want acres treated, some people want miles treated, and just as the question that Andrea asked, some things they want tons per acre or some other measurement. So just knowing that up front, I mean, it's just important, right? And then, of course, your agency. People often forget that they're so focused on the funders that they forget what their mission is. And for a lot of my clients is, well, how many landowners are we serving? Is the work that we're doing, how is it impacting their lives, and how do we measure that? Okay, next one. Unique identification numbers. I can't stress this enough. And do not call it, North Ridge fuel break A, North Ridge fuel break B, or 1B. Just come up with some identification numbering system for your organization, whatever it is. Just stick with it, be consistent, and don't rely on the project name, because people call things differently, and they're never going to spell it the same way. Which goes to my next tip: never type. Don't let anyone type in anything ever, because we all make mistakes. There's so many tools, particularly with the Esri products, where nobody has to type anything. Just make them pick stuff or enter in numbers at the most. And then the last one is just build in flexibility. And maybe that's just more of a mindset than the actual data, because the databases can change and you can do all sorts of things. And so just be aware that, being flexible with your data, it's okay. GIS has a lot of tools to manipulate data, so you can always do a lot of processing later on to get the data that you need. But of course, as I said, think about it at the beginning about what sort of data you need to collect to be able to do that. That's it. Those are my tips.
All right. Fantastic. I hereby dub those Esther's BMPs. I mean, those are fantastic pieces of wisdom to live by. Oh my gosh, I don't know which one's my favorite. Possibly don't let anybody type anything ever.
Okay.
Good
Yeah,
stuff.
because people always type it, and then they have different ideas about just Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think behind each one of your tips is maybe like dozens of hours of cleanup, maybe hundreds. So hard-won wisdom. Thank you for that. Questions for Esther? Andrea says, hooray for dashboards and pick lists and templates. We throw in their domains. Good stuff. Andrea?
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you had any dashboards that you were particularly fond of or were available to share or peruse more later.
You know, they're also different, right? Because they're dependent on the agency's needs and I know that the Napa Communities Byways Foundation is really happy with their dashboard. It's changed over the years though, and they've changed it. So I mean, just like anything, they're so flexible, right? It's just what you need them to the data you need them to provide. So um, if I come up with a good list, I will send it to the group.
Thank you, Esther. I think we're going to move on to our last speaker, Givonne Law, who's a fuels reduction coordinator for the East Bay Regional Parks District Fire Department. Givonne, thank you so much. We're going to hear about your one of your many projects as a case study for data workflow. So, Givonne, take it away.
All right, thanks everyone. So you should be able to hopefully see a screen here showing our treatment area that I'm going to be discussing the data workflow for. The project itself is located in Anthony Schloe Regional Park. The acreage here is a little inaccurate in that it actually took into account some portions of the mapped area that are not highlighted in this polygon. However, the overall project was a little over 900 acres. We're about 600 acres into that right now, and we have learned a lot of lessons in data workflow. I'll start off really hitting on some of the points that have already been, a lot of the points that have already been discussed by the other speakers here today. So there'll be some repetition. And I'll try and keep on time here. But along with some of the, data workflow that we've moved through from pre-treatment to operational data to post-treatment, we have, of course, our wish list items. So in pre-treatment, a lot of our data has to do with needs-driven data management. So we need data to put together an RFP or to set up a contract, or we need to provide data to our funders and applications for the funding. Sometimes for other projects, not this one, we're even further behind in the pipeline, and we're putting together data for the permitting process. And all of that generally involves some of the stuff that's already been discussed here. There's data on forest or vegetation structure and composition, like stand data, understory presence, canopy closure, presence of invasives and other species, as well as, of course, sensitive resources that are in and amongst that area. There's also, of course, in regards to the budgeting, whether, wherever that project is in the pipeline of pre-treatment, evaluations of tools and treatment to actually accomplish the objectives that were set out to do, whether that was highlighted in permitting or is still being developed, and then planning on how to utilize those tools for the initial treatment. All of this is pretty data heavy in that, we're out there using everything from Esri to FlamMap to Behave to proprietary software applications to collect this data, do desktop reviews, enter field review information, and then analyze it as necessary for whatever portion, again, of the pipeline we're in, whether it's the permitting, the funding, or the contracting. So all of that happens before implementation, before there's boots on the ground. Move into some other pictures that I have here for an example of some of the, collecting stand data from the perspective of East Bay Regional Parks. It's a challenge to try and categorize, a pre-treated stand such as the one you see here. This is from our project in almost the middle of that polygon that you guys were just looking at. And it's really typical eucalyptus stand for the East Bay Hills, probably for the majority of the Bay Area, in that it's fairly unmanaged, has had various harvests and other sorts of non-anthropogenic disturbances that have greatly affected the stand composition. There's a huge host of invasives, and to go in and do what the rest of the forestry industry does, which is send in cruising teams to go and do inventories or to run transects through this or to collect plot data, it's very burdensome. So we are relying on other forms of data collection. Again, we are out there in the field doing some of that stuff, but we're also doing desktop reviews. And that fine scale vegetation mapping is one such example that we're really looking forward to being able to utilize. But in the meantime, we've used photo series and other similar digital analysis to collect some of that data and get things rolling. Then we move into the operations. So the permitting's in, the funding is there, the contractor or crews for work have been selected, and everything's off and running. And now we're in the midst of the next portion of our data needs, which I'll keep going. But our live data, as well as data for operational capabilities. A lot of this has been reviewed already, so I'll go through it kind of quickly, but yeah, we use a lot of live mapping technology. We, along with the Esri suite of software that we use, we have some proprietary data that we'll utilize in the field. I'll show, let's see if it's still signed in. Yeah, sorry, it's on my other page here. This is our field mapper. A lot of my team isn't as familiar or comfortable working in Esri software as I am, and so we'll be utilizing this more proprietary version and have that live in the field for live data entry. Then when we're speaking to our operators, a lot of the time they are working with Avenza. That's what they're most comfortable with, and that's what they have on their phones. That's what they're easily able to pick up and learn. And so data translation, data communication in between the Esri suite, any proprietary software that we're utilizing, and then transferring that to Avenza and then back again is something that we have and we use and we would like to make better and easier. That develops, these maps like what you see here. It's as was discussed earlier, not live, but progress tracking of the many various treatments that we have going on in the St. Anthony Chabot project at one time. And we're doing this for reporting purposes. We're doing this for funding purposes and billing. The contractor is collecting data, and then that's getting quality assessed in the field. And then they're submitting that for their invoicing. And then we're using the same data for our grant reporting. So it's used over and over again. And it's a little clunky to be moving in between Esri and proprietary work and Avenza. There's been some challenges in regards to projection and acreage calculations and collecting all the information that we need to collect via attribute tables, which Avenza has no capabilities in doing. So there's or at least very limited capabilities, I should say. Yeah, there's been some challenges, but that's what we are working with, and said we are limited in that regards to what our operators who are in the machines can utilize. Luckily with Avenza, we have been able to work with geofencing, as well as reporting and tracking back and forth. So it definitely has its benefits. Not saying anything bad about Avenza. It's a little clunky. And then to keep things moving along here, I see I'm running out of time. Post-treatment work. All of this data, of course, that we have been building from the pre-operations, pre-treatment data collection to the operational data collection, if it's not robust enough, if it's not accurate enough, if it's not recorded in a way, like was discussed earlier, that can be recommunicated and utilized again in the future, then your post-treatment data flow is going to be pretty crippled. And that's been problematic. We've definitely run into situations like that on past projects, and we're already seeing some of that happening on this project as well. We are in the thick right now of our maintenance planning. You know, this is our largest project that we've ever taken on in this park for fuels management. So the maintenance is going to be a bear, and we're using all the tools in the toolbox to help maintain the work that we've done out here. That's going to include goats, it's going to include herbicide, it's going to include burning, it's probably going to include more mechanical work, it's going to definitely include hand work. And we are in a spot where we need to figure out how to make sure that all of the work that we were planning is within our permitting guidelines and prescriptions, that we have funding for it, and that we're making the right choices as to which tool to use based on how much funding we have and what permitting we have for the frequency, as well as just how to implement that on the ground. And the more we're able to plan this at scale, utilizing data rather than being in the field and having to make sort of, on the fly decisions that are maybe more based on like, this is the funding that we have right now. It's just more ideal to have that data available and to be able to utilize it, not only for that planning purpose, but then again, we're out there again in the field working, in live conditions and changing conditions, and the data needs to adapt to that. It's definitely a gap that we are coming across, even so much so, it hasn't come out yet. I have my fingers crossed, but there are concerns circulating around about the fine scale vegetation mapping and how current it might be with operations like this and those many other fuels management projects that were being discussed, not only here, but out and about in Contra Costa County, Moraga Fire District, and all around the Alameda and Contra Costa County areas. There's been a lot of fuels work going on, and whether all that data is going to capture all of that and actually be representative of the changing conditions is something that we're waiting to see. And it's not just that, it's any sort of data collection. The conditions are changing so quickly that it's a gap that we're having to fill with field work, which is not sustainable. So I think that covered at least the basics of everything I wanted to cover. Sorry if it was scattered. Definitely open for questions. And if anyone, wants to follow up on anything after, I'll put my email in the chat.
Wonderful. Givonne, thank you so much. Oh boy, that point, the points you made there at the end have been on my mind as well, just as all three topics were presented. Just this idea that these are dynamic systems that we're working with, and the spatial kind of nature of the data are fixed in a certain time. And then within those spatial units, whether they're polygons or plots or whatever, treatments are changing over time as well. So you've got this spatial and this temporal, these two dimensions that are changing, and you want your data to reflect these changes. I'm just curious, like how are you currently like literally doing that? Is that in a table, or is it like a polygon on top of a polygon that represents two time periods? I mean, these kinds of data things are, yeah. Just curious how you're dealing with that.
So we are dealing with a lot of mapping and polygons, so it's a little clunky. I'm gonna pull up real quick a portion of that. Oh, it's actually in here. There we go. This is one portion of the project maintenance that we're talking about. We're actually running 3 different studies right now that are going to be diving into this mapping. So I really need to update it. It's just time consuming to update. This is our herbicide map. So this map here is showing the history of herbicide initial application associated with our project. And once updated, we'll start showing rounds of maintenance of subsequent herbicide applications. We're going to be utilizing this map not only for planning for, more herbicide application, making sure those trees that we cut down actually stay dead. But following up with herbicide efficacy, we've had over close to 3 years of herbicide application and have actually gotten a lot of very anecdotal field-based observational data of herbicide that should have worked that just had almost no efficacy at all. And other times it was extremely effective, and we're trying to figure out what the patterns are. It's a great opportunity to hopefully really dive into the data and the project area to find out some of the best ways, whether it's time, application method, or application mix for killing eucalyptus. That's what we're hoping for. And this data is getting updated live as more rounds of maintenance are being pushed in. As you can see, it's not as granular as we would like it to be. It would be excellent if there was more data collected to make this database more robust. Hopes and dreams. Who knows what I'll have time for this summer, but we'll see. And this, sort of data is getting put on top of our grazing maps. It's been on top of our mechanical and hand work maps, all to evaluate our maintenance practices associated with what is essentially a pretty typical way of us initially treating an unmanaged eucalyptus stand in the East Bay Hills. And that's what we got so far. It'd be great if we could have more live data capture, whether that be aerial imagery capture or even LiDAR. We've talked with contractors about running drone operations on a frequent basis throughout a project. It's on a small area or running transects and collecting data that way. But it's never come to fruition for a variety of reasons. And I'm sure there are many other ways that I don't know about to collect this data that isn't doing it by hand or being out there in the field or relying on contractor reporting. But that's where we're at right now.
Thank you for sharing. Excellent. Questions from the group for Givonne? Actually, I'm going to go ahead, just in the interest of time, I'm going to invite questions for any of our speakers at this time.
I don't have a question, but I just that idea of how to keep track of the timing of stuff, just what I know some agencies or nonprofits do, because like or in this case of Givonne or anyone who's has a set piece of land that they know they're going to go visit the exact same places year after year after year. They just in this particular preserve, they just have their weed management layer. They know the places that have weed problems that they're going to be putting herbicide down on, and they just already have these polygons set, and they just copy them from year to year. So 2022, these are the polygons that got treated, the data is appropriately filled out for that year. Then they just copy paste that to the next year and fill out the data appropriately for that year. So it's always using the same polygon. They may have to change some of them, but for the most part, it just makes it a little bit easier for them to manage the data. At least that's how they're doing it.
Thank you for sharing, Esther. Curious if others have experience that you want to share on that topic. I just imagine that it's setting up a system for an organization or an agency to engage from a data standpoint. These are the little stumbling blocks. These are the questions that come up, I imagine. And really, there's just sort of a possible solution everywhere you turn. And so it's really fantastic to hear what some pros are, you know, resting on. What are some of the practices? Larry.
Yeah, this is, well, more of a comment. You know, I live in the Diablo Range, and then I have rangeland also in the area of Collier and Doolin Canyons. And then 25-year history as a horse veterinarian traveling the countryside. What I can say is that within the last 5 years, the transition in our wildlands from a Mediterranean climate to a sub-Saharan climate is just accelerating unbelievably. And we're seeing changes in the vegetation that occur on a yearly basis, and dramatic shifts in the amount of native grasses, or I'm sorry, European grasses, and change of invasive weeds. You know, all of us are aware of the fact that mustard is exploding throughout the Bay Area, and in terms of growth, and you know, celebrated by many of our friends in the urban world. But that being the case, you know, there's, as a producer, it appears that moving through processes like this could actually delay some of the efforts that are needed on the ground to decrease fire risk at our urban rural interfaces. And I mean, is there a sense of that at all, or am I just kind of off base with that observation?
Yeah, Larry, that's an interesting question. Just to recap, it sounds like what you're asking is there's a lot of what we talked about a lot today is process and
Right.
and you know, data capture, and what I'm hearing, and I just, you know, quick answer from our speakers. This is kind of a situation where if you set up your infrastructure, you can actually go faster in a lot of other areas, especially in terms of reporting and some of the things that are just required by law. Is that a fair kind of assumption, speakers? Hopefully I recap that okay.
Sorry, yes, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Sure.
Are we seeing a need to go through the same process on private lands? I mean, it still is the case that private lands are the majority of the open space resources in Alameda County. And so is there an option on those private lands to manage the rangeland with a little bit more expediency? Or, you know, they required also to go through the same steps of mapping and developing implementation strategies?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question. Maybe Deb, maybe I don't, she can.
Yeah, is there an RCD person on board?
Well, we're coming up on time. Deb, you just took yourself off mute. Do you have a quick answer?
I don't, I'm the same as Esther. I'm not sure if I'm qualified to answer that, but I was going to defer it to Timothy and put him on the spot.
Timothy had to run.
Oh, okay.
And we just want to really respect everybody's time and just close here on time. Larry, thanks for your comment. Very thought-provoking.
And
Folks,
Larry,
thank you
if you
so
want to
much.
give me a call, I'd be happy to talk about that over the phone a
There
little
we
bit,
go.
go into deeper conversation.
Thank you.
We're going to let you go. We'll see you in June. We're going to talk about platforms, data platforms like FireAside and others. So thanks everybody for being here. Thanks again to our speakers, and we will see you in a couple of months.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Tom.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.